Of course, we have no idea how many PlayStation 5 owners will be anticipating Final Fantasy XVI, but we can look at other factors to get a rough estimate of launch week's sales. I'll mention a few big name titles as examples and take a look at the release window and what other games occupy the time frame. Well, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is of course a factor even as a Switch exclusive, but that launches in May. And Final Fantasy XVI is a full month later, so I think it's in the clear. But what will PlayStation 5 owners have at the time? Will they be starved for a major game to play? Not quite. Street Fighter 6 is out June 2nd, and then Diablo 4 just 2 weeks before Final Fantasy XVI. Now those are two pretty different games than Final Fantasy XVI, but Sony has been, and I anticipate them to continue, to push Street Fighter 6. And that's all good, but Final Fantasy XVI is a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and hopefully Sony will prioritize marketing it as their AAA big summer hit. For context, God of War Ragnarok is PlayStation's fastest selling game of all time. It launched with a total of 5.1 million units sold, and by the time of Sony's financial report in early February of this year, it had sold 11 million. Now before I give my prediction, I'd like to go back in time to the last mainline Final Fantasy. The PS4 had sold 50 to 60 million units worldwide in 2016 when Final Fantasy XV launched. This 2016 and Final Fantasy XV and talking about 16 is really going to start getting confusing, but stick with me here. 2016 is also a similar time span from PS4's console launch to Final Fantasy XV as it is with the launch of the PS5 in 2020 to Final Fantasy XVI this June. So this is a great comparison, but also take into consideration the supply shortages and the COVID pandemic that shunted the PS5 sales for much of its early life cycle. It is only now just starting to sell better, easier to find and purchase. So I do expect the install base to be very strong by June, and I'll explain. That aforementioned Sony financial report also showed that 32 million PS5 units had been sold by February of this year. Sony projected to sell 6 million more units from then to the end of March. That's how rapidly the install base is growing. For further context, Final Fantasy XV sold over 5 million units on launch day. It is worth noting that Final Fantasy XV was also available on Xbox, and according to Benji's sales on Twitter, Final Fantasy XV sold about 8.9 million units worldwide in just 2 months' time. I found these stats from PSU.com showing off that 80% of the sales were on PlayStation 4 in the UK, so we can assume that the PlayStation held a similar percentage 4 to 5 in its worldwide sales. Final Fantasy XVI will be PlayStation 5 exclusive though, when it launches and for at least 6 months after, and once again Yoshi P says longer than that because they will need time to properly optimize it for PC. Also, with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth due this winter, I'm willing to bet we won't see Final Fantasy XVI on PC or maybe even Xbox until this time next year. Why is nobody asking for an Xbox version? Come on, guys. Oh, man. So anyways, don't wait. Go buy it on PS5 this June. So, upon Final Fantasy XV's launch, it sold about 4 million units on PlayStation, with 55 million PS4 units out in the wild at the time. To better predict how many PS5 units will be out in June of this year, well, let's take a look at how many PS4 units had sold in June of 2016. That's 43.5 million units, so I can estimate that there will be nearly 40 million PS5 units sold by June of this year or more. So, I predict that Final Fantasy XVI will sell 3.5 million at launch. I know, not quite God of War Ragnarok's 5.1 million launch number, is it? In order to hit that high end of my prediction or even exceed it, well, that will depend on how hard Sony and Square-Enix pushes it in marketing. I asked Final fans on YouTube and Twitter, how many units will Final Fantasy XVI sell at launch? Very confident over here on YouTube. Let's take a look at Twitter. Twitter results are very spread out here. Cactar All-Star says more than 4.1. The PS5 skyrocketing sales, Final Fantasy XVI being aimed at a wider audience, and the amazing previews will make this one of the biggest games of the year. And I gotta agree, the preview event was extremely positive. That was the best thing that could have happened. The best thing that could have come out of that preview event was everyone was very, very excited about what they just experienced. And I watched and read all of these preview articles and videos, and I don't think near one of them said that the game was bad or that they had an issue with the game. It was all positive. That is an amazing thing. And then the direct references to God of War, which is what we've been talking about in this video on purpose here. The Night Sky Icon, which is the Night Sky Prince, commented on this Twitter poll and ended up getting 64 likes, which is a whole lot more than what I got, everybody. You know what I'm saying? It's all good though. Night Sky Prince comments and says, I think Final Fantasy XVI is going to sell long past its release window. I think it'll be a word of mouth game that continues to sell through years later, much like Nier Automata was. I don't know if Final Fantasy fans will appreciate it as much, but I think over time it will reach a new audience. I will admit, as of right now, I'm not very impressed with the promotion of Final Fantasy XVI. Of course, I am extremely hyped because it appeals to me, but when you compare it to Final Fantasy XV's multimedia approach, which also included a full event called Uncovered that took place at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles live. It was hosted by Kinda Funny's Greg Miller and Tim Geddes. Hironobu Sakaguchi was there. Aaron Paul and Lena Headey promoted the feature-length prequel film to the game among announcements of an anime and other media. And keep in mind, Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad were huge at the time. A partnership with Audi, a demo, just so much hype at that event. And then plenty to not only sustain the hype, but to keep building upon it until launch. Jake is going to help me set up this next part of the video. Jake says, I think it will sell really well, but maybe not pull crazy numbers initially. I feel like outside of the fan base, there's a lot of people who haven't really been sold by Final Fantasy XV's marketing so far, which I really can't blame them for. I feel some of the trailers so far maybe have shown too little, and we haven't really gotten much mainstream marketing outside of them. So let's talk about what Final Fantasy XVI needs to do. Well, where's that Final Fantasy event that was rumored? That would be big. Show off Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Reveal the Final Fantasy IX anime and possibly that remake that's been rumored from the Nvidia link a long time ago. Show us Final Fantasy Tactics remastered. And then end it with a huge Final Fantasy XVI presentation and drop the demo right after. The buzz for Final Fantasy would be at an all-time high. Final Fantasy XIV will obviously have a collaboration event with 16. They did it with 15, so I'm sure it will happen again, as long as Yoshi P approves his own request. So that has the Final Fantasy fans covered, huh? But Final Fantasy XVI is reaching for more than that, right? They're reaching for more than just us. Final Fantasy XVI is looking for the God of War players, that massive fan base that skyrocketed Ragnarok to be Sony's fastest selling game of all time. A collaboration with that game, yeah, that would be pretty great. And we've seen Final Fantasy XV and Assassin's Creed collaborate in the past, but I don't know if we'll see something like that again, so it would be good though. Shoot. Final Fantasy XV had promotional collaborations with Cup Noodles. Jones Soda labeled their drinks Wiz's Energizing Elixir, sold exclusively at Target during the time of Final Fantasy XV's big marketing push. Sony made a themed Final Fantasy XV PS4 Slim model console, a trailer featuring Eminem music. There was even a freaking live premiere event hosted by IGN on launch day for Final Fantasy 15. All I know is they gotta get Final Fantasy 16 in front of people. So look no further than Final Fantasy 15's marketing strategy and then build on that, improve on that for the best way to make Final Fantasy 16 extremely successful and perhaps the most successful Final Fantasy launch of all time. And the time to begin the marketing push for Final Fantasy 16 is right friggin' now, baby. Let's F and go!